So this little video has been a while in the making, but it's fight week, it's Monday, and I wanted to drop a final breakdown of my thoughts on Anthony Joshua versus Vladimir Klitschko. This video will include my fight pick and prediction. First and foremost, great fight, great occasion, genuinely pumped for this one, massively up for it, really looking forward to it. I genuinely believe this is a great fight. I also believe, let me start by saying, that I believe any result in this fight is very possible. For those watching this video, for us who are hardcore boxing fans, for us who've been watching the sport for 5 or 6 years plus, let's be honest. Would any of us really be surprised if Vladimir Klitschko knocked out Joshua? Probably not. Would any of us really be surprised if Anthony Joshua knocked out Klitschko? Probably not. Would any of us be surprised if Klitschko took Joshua to school on points? Probably not. Would any of us be surprised if Joshua went and got a home decision against Klitschko? Probably not. This is a genuinely competitive fight. There are a number of questions up in the air. I believe any result is possible in this fight. I find it genuinely hard to pick a winner. And, I get a lot of comments on my channel. Get a lot of comments on my social media. Get a lot of comments on my videos. And a lot of people out there are coming down very strongly on one side of the debate. And that's on both sides. I've had a lot of messages from people saying Anthony Joshua is a hype job. He's going to get exposed in one round. He's going to get knocked unconscious. I've had a lot of messages from people saying Klitschko's over the hill. Klitschko is overrated. Klitschko was never any good anyway. Joshua was going to walk through him in a couple of rounds. Now, both of those arguments, obviously they're in opposition, but either one of them could be right on the night. Who knows? But realistically, based on the information that is available in front of us right now, I do not believe that this is a fight that anyone can predict with the utmost confidence. I don't believe this is a fight where anyone can sit on their sofa at home, just like I'm doing now, and say they are 90% sure either fighter is going to win. I genuinely view this as a 50-50 fight. I know the odds suggest otherwise. I know Anthony Joshua is a big favourite. We'll cover gambling and the markets on this fight in a video later on in the week. So if you want to hear about that, press subscribe now so you can be notified when that video comes online. But realistically, this is a 50-50 fight. This is close. This is competitive. Any result is possible. Regardless of who I go on to pick in this video, I'm going to start by saying this is not a fight that I will bet the mortgage on. This is not a fight that I will say I am certain fighter A or fighter B is going to win. And this is not a fight I really think that anyone out there should be saying it's easy work for either guy, because this is high level stuff. This is mega competitive. And for my money, the winner of this fight is very definitely the number one heavyweight active in the sport. And whoever that is, they will deserve that credit. If Vladimir Klitschko wins, he'll have had 10 years of dominance. He'll have had a loss in the Tyson Fury fight, and then he'll have come back with a bang by beating young lion in Anthony Joshua. If Anthony Joshua wins, he'll have made a rise to the top of epic proportions, turning into the pros, fighting a guy like Vladimir Klitschko comparatively very early in his career. And if he gets a win of this magnitude early on, for me, it surpasses anything we've seen from Deontay Wilder. It surpasses anything we've seen from Joseph Parker. It surpasses anything we've seen in the heavyweight division from David Haye, from any of the other big names out there. So I will have the winner of this fight, whoever it is, and whatever method they win as the number one active heavyweight within the sport. So, big fight, big fight. And let's start by talking about some of the strengths and weaknesses of both guys. Let's talk about the strengths first. So we'll start with the strengths of Vladimir Klitschko. These are very well established. Klitschko, an Olympic gold medalist, just like Anthony Joshua. For me, I would say he has got one of the best jabs in heavyweight boxing history. There's other great jabs out there. People talk Larry Holmes. People talk George Foreman. But I think the Vladimir Klitschko jab certainly deserves to be in the conversation of one of the greatest heavyweight jabs of all time. He's also got immense power, and I've seen a few people who really don't know about boxing discrediting Vladimir Klitschko's power. I think the guy's got 50 odd knockouts on his resume, and if you're telling me that Vladimir Klitschko doesn't carry leading heavyweight power, that tells me you probably haven't followed his career like I have, and that tells me you probably haven't watched the majority of his fights. Look at that Kubrat Pulev fight. Look at that Alexander Povetkin fight. These are relatively recent examples of the power and the danger that Vladimir Klitschko possesses. We've talked about his jab already. The right cross he throws off that jab, lethal. The lead left hook that he throws, lethal. This is a genuinely heavy-handed man, a big athlete, a big jabber, and someone who has completely mastered their style. Vladimir Klitschko, for me, possibly not the most natural fighter. He's not the most fluid, natural operator like a Tyson Fury, but he has completely ironed out a style that works for him. He's mastered it, he's perfected it, and he knows just how to make it work. If we talk about weaknesses of Vladimir Klitschko, I guess that predictability. We talk about how he's mastered his style, but realistically, we know what he's going to bring to the table at this stage. He is not an elite. He's not an elite inside fighter. He's not an elite body puncher. He's probably not going to bring something to the table that's massively going to mix it up. The fact that he's 41 years old or will be on fight night, certainly you could perceive that as a negative. The fact that he's been inactive, been out of the ring for a year, you could perceive that as a major negative. The fact that last time he was in the ring, he was pretty much undressed from a boxing perspective by Tyson Fury, that's certainly a negative as well. So for all the pros of Vladimir Klitschko, and those pros are very, very considerable, there's also multiple reasons why you could pick against him in this fight. There's also the punch resistance thing. People have long suspected that Vladimir Klitschko is a bit glassy. They've suspected that if he was caught clean by a guy like Anthony Joshua, he'd be stopped, he'd be out of there. I think sometimes that issue is overstated. This is heavyweight boxing. You're getting punched in the face by some of the biggest punchers in the world. I've seen Vladimir Klitschko go 12 rounds with David Haye. I've seen Vladimir Klitschko go 12 rounds with Alexander Povetkin. I've seen Vladimir Klitschko go 12 rounds with Tyson Fury. He may not have the best chin in the world. He may not have a David Tua chin. He may not have a George Foreman chin. But he is not someone who gets knocked over by a gust of wind. And, realistically, he's either got a not so bad chin or he's very, very good at not getting hit by the fact that he's gone 12 rounds with the guys that I've mentioned. As for Anthony Joshua, the strengths of Joshua are considerable. Very athletic, very hard hitting, huge momentum. He's been active, he's been busy, he's beaten everyone in his path so far by devastation. Never seen the distance in a fight. His timing is underrated. This is a guy who we've largely seen from an athletic perspective in the sport. But that's not to say he's not a good boxer. He lays traps for opponents. He times well. He counterpunches well. He's got a range of weaponry in his arsenal. He's a very, very, very capable fighter. And even though he maybe lacks a top 10 name on his resume, certainly an elite heavyweight name on his resume, the way he has dispatched of opposition like Dominic Breazeale, opposition like Dillian Whyte, tell us that this is a guy who's operating very much towards the top of the heavyweight division. I've always believed momentum is very key in the sport of boxing, and there isn't a fighter in the world with more momentum right now than Anthony Joshua. His profile's at an all-time high. As I say, he's won every fight he's ever been in by way of knockout, and he's coming to this fight full of confidence and expected to win. Against a guy who's 41 years old, who's been inactive, and whose last fight was a loss. So many, many reasons to pick Anthony Joshua. As for the weaknesses of Anthony Joshua, for me, The weaknesses of Anthony Joshua currently are largely unclear. Or in his professional career today, he actually hasn't shown a lot of weaknesses. The Dillian Whyte fight, he took one or two punches in that fight, and we could debate how well he took those punches. We could debate how instinctive he was defensively when the bullets were flying. We could debate how natural his response was when he was hurt. But realistically, he got hurt, he got wobbled, he got buzzed by Dillian Whyte, and he went on to win that fight with a heavy knockout. And apart from that, really, he hasn't shown many weaknesses. I'm yet to see the Joshua fight where he takes multiple shots. I'm yet to see the Joshua fight where he looks completely gassed. I'm yet to see the fight where Joshua gets exposed defensively. Joshua hasn't really exhibited weaknesses in the professional ring. I guess with Joshua, his weaknesses are yet unknown. And that's the very weird thing about Joshua, is even though he's this global superstar, even though many people are already considering a number one heavyweight, the weaknesses of Joshua are still widely unknown, as essentially he's a prospect. He's a guy who's had 18 professional fights. He's a guy who hasn't fought a top 10 heavyweight at this stage of his career. And he's a guy who's made such easy work of the opposition he's been in with that we're actually yet to see him tested, aren't we? So Anthony Joshua may have the best stamina in the world. Anthony Joshua may have the best chin in the world. Anthony Joshua may have the best back foot game in the world. He may have the best inside game in the world. But the truth is we don't know, because we are yet to see him exhibit these attributes in the professional ring. And that's probably because he hasn't had to exhibit those attributes. We're yet to see a Joshua fight where an opponent's put him on his back foot and taken him to the inside and roughed him up and caught him clean with a load of hooks and uppercuts. And, because of that, any weaknesses that we suspect Joshua may have are suspicions. They're not proven, in fact. Joshua could raise his game against a guy like Klitschko, or, even more frighteningly, Joshua may not even need to raise his game. He may be able to put in the same performance he's put in against guys previously and just wipe Vladimir Klitschko out. We will see come fight night. Of course, there are more rumours about Joshua at present. We've seen him hurt and wobbled in the amateurs. We've seen him stopped in the amateurs. Well-established rumours that he's been stopped in sparring by David Price, which, people can debate, but my instinct is that did happen. Lots of more recent rumours that he's had problems in sparring with the likes of Lawrence Okoli, Joe Joyce, Daniel Dubois. Frankly, any sort of prospect in and around the cruiserweight to heavyweight division recently has been linked with a sparring rumour with Anthony Joshua. So, it's kind of toss of a coin what you make about Anthony Joshua. He's not shown these weaknesses in the pro ring. But if you look back at his amateur career, if you listen to some of the sparring rumours, and it depends how inclined you are to take those as relevant bits of evidence, you could certainly make a case that this is too early for him. And I think, regardless of whether you believe Joshua is the next great heavyweight or not, we have to acknowledge that this is a huge step up in class. I mean, Joshua's best opponent today is either Brazil, it's either Molina, or it's Dillian Whyte. And all of those guys are sort of fringe top 20. But here he's going up against a guy who, for me, and I'll stick with this comment regardless if Joshua knocks out Klitschko in a round, but for me, Klitschko is an all-time great top 10 heavyweight. I seriously have him on a top 10 all-time great heavyweight list. I think his decade of dominance at the top more than justifies that. And this is a huge step up in class. You're stepping up from the Eric Molinas of this world to the Vladimir Klitschkos of this world. And I've used this analogy before on this channel, but for me that's the equivalent of saying, if you're a football fan, if you've got a team in League One of the English Football League and they're smashing up every opponent 5-0, 6-0, does that necessarily mean you back them to go and beat Manchester United or Chelsea? And that's kind of how I view this step up. Joshua's shown all the talent against that level, but can he have the same effectiveness against a guy like Vladimir Klitschko, who represents the elite of the sport? That's a key question for me. But these questions may not be answered. How will Joshua do against a big guy with an elite level jab? How will Joshua do when he's caught clean on the chin? These are all questions that I have about Anthony Joshua, and that I'm dubious about, how he'll stand up to those areas. But the truth of the matter is that Joshua's proven to be such a force of nature in his career today that it's perfectly conceivable we won't actually find out those answers in this fight with Klitschko. You know, he may be too instantaneously aggressive, and he may be able to get the old man out of there early. You know, I don't know, but there is certainly a lot of really, really interesting questions to be answered about Joshua's career. At this point, I don't think we can say Joshua's a complete fighter, but I also don't think we can say conclusively that he's not a complete fighter, because I think there's so much of unknown there. It's hard to do a video on this fight without discussing the Klitschko-Fury fight. A lot of people use that fight as a reason that Wladimir Klitschko is over the hill, as a reason that Wladimir Klitschko is an old man, and as a reason that Joshua will knock out Wladimir Klitschko. My perspective is, and I covered Klitschko fights on this channel prior to that Fury fight. You know, there's still videos up, ancient videos of me 4 or 5 years ago now, doing predictions for Klitschko Leopai, doing predictions for Klitschko Pulev. And at the time I said that the kind of guy who's going to beat Wladimir Klitschko is either a kind of guy who can escape his holding game and rough him up on the inside, or a guy who can take away his jab. And I believed, and I predicted that Tyson Fury would win that fight, and I bet on it at 5-1. Videos are still up on the channel. But I said that Tyson Fury would win that fight because of the fact that he would be able to take away Klitschko's jab. I felt that Fury's awkwardness, his ability to fight on the back foot and bob and weave and duck, the ability to change stances, the fact that he was bigger than Klitschko, and the fact he had such good footwork for a big man, I thought that would mean that Klitschko would struggle to find his range. And I thought that would essentially mean that Klitschko, who's so reliant on that left-hand lead jab, would really struggle to find his feet in the fight and would leave gaps for Tyson Fury. And do you know what? I've got a lot of predictions wrong on this channel. I don't claim to have any special talent for predicting fights, because long-time viewers know that I get as many wrong as I get right. But on that particular one, I must say that I did get it right. And I think that vulnerability in Wladimir Klitschko's game that I suspected was there was highlighted and emphasised by that Tyson Fury fight. However, will those vulnerabilities be exposed by Joshua? Certain people believe Fury was not really that good anyway. They believe that Wladimir Klitschko just got massively old overnight, and that's why he looked poor. I strongly disagree with that. I'm in camp B. I think that Klitschko was the normal Klitschko that night. I think that was the Klitschko I expected in there. That was the Klitschko who'd previously fought Bryant Jennings and won. That was the Klitschko who'd previously fought Kubrat Pulev and won. It's just he struggled with Fury's size, awkwardness, movement and style. Now Joshua, you could argue that Joshua could beat Fury. I'm not necessarily saying that Fury is necessarily a better fighter than Joshua. But what I am saying is styles make fights, and stylistically, Joshua represents an extremely different test to a fighter like Tyson Fury. And whilst Joshua poses his own threat, he's much more athletic than Fury, he's much more powerful than Fury, I don't believe he represents the slippery, awkward challenge that Tyson Fury does. And I believe a guy like Wladimir Klitschko is going to have a much higher chance of establishing his jab against Anthony Joshua than he was against Tyson Fury. I don't believe Joshua's getting low. I don't believe Joshua's riding punches and leaning back and ducking out of the way. I don't believe, Joshua's switching to southpaw and showing all sorts of back foot lateral movement to make Klitschko miss. Now, the counter argument to that is that if Joshua lands once on Wladimir Klitschko, he could take him out, whereas perhaps Fury lacks that power. But my point is that I am prepared, for the sake of this prediction, to ignore that form line that is Tyson Fury versus Wladimir Klitschko. I'm prepared to draw a line under that, because I don't believe that specific piece of form is relevant to picking a winner between Klitschko and Joshua. I believe that the stylistic challenge Joshua presents is so different to the stylistic challenge Tyson Fury presented that you can't really look at the Klitschko that turned up in that fight and try and work out how Joshua would get on with that Klitschko. I think you've got to look at the Klitschko prior to that. You've got to look at the Klitschko who beat Bryant Jennings on points. You've got to look at the Klitschko who was devastating and scoring a knockout against Kubrat Pulev. And that's the Klitschko I expect to turn up to this fight. Klitschko's an old man. Yes, he's 41 years old. Clearly, that's older than ideal for a heavyweight. But Klitschko's a guy who's kept himself in shape. Klitschko's a guy who you never see looking overweight, who you never see out on the beers, who you never see, living a party lifestyle. Klitschko's a guy who wakes up on Boxing Day and he's still got a six pack, because he's eaten well on Christmas Day. Let's put it that way. And Klitschko makes a persuasive counter argument that even though he's been inactive for a year, he's been pretty active in boxing for best part of a quarter of a century. The guy's had something like 65 to 70 professional boxing fights. I forget the number exactly, but I think it's high 60 fights. Maybe a year's rest will have actually done him good. And it's not like he's been completely inactive either. He's had training camps during that period, preparing for Joshua and preparing for the cancelled Tyson Fury fight. So, very, very possible that rest could have done Vladimir Klitschko good. And I'm not prepared to believe he simply got old overnight against Tyson Fury. I think Fury was a stylistic nightmare for him that could have exposed Klitschko at 20, 30 or 40. So I'm thinking, does the Klitschko who turned up and beat Bryant Jennings, and beat Kubrat Pulev, beat Anthony Joshua? And the answer to that is, genuinely, I don't know. It's so hard to make a confident prediction of this fight because there are doubts surrounding Klitschko. Certainly Joshua's more athletic than Kubrat Pulev. He's got much greater amateur background than Bryant Jennings. He hits harder than both of them put together. So it's hard to make a confident prediction. And there are doubts about both guys. So I have to make a probability call. I have to say, this is not a fight that I'm 90% confident on. This is not a fight that I, really have a massively strong prediction on. But on the balance of probabilities, who do I think is the most likely winner? For me, it's Vladimir Klitschko. And I think the reason is that Joshua is simply so untested. There are so many unknowns to Joshua's game that I think there's a greater probability that an established world-class fighter like Vladimir Klitschko will be able to find any one of those unknown gaps in Joshua's game. I think that is the most likely option in this fight. I think Joshua's going to get hit in this fight. That's something I'm relatively confident on. How many times have we seen Joshua eat a jab in the pro ring? We saw it once or twice against Gary Cornish before Joshua scored a first round stoppage. We saw it once or twice against Dominic Breazeale, but Breazeale didn't have the power and Breazeale was already beaten to a pulp at this point. How is Joshua going to react when he's caught clean by that battering ram jab of Vladimir Klitschko? How is Joshua going to cope with the defensive problems he's going to be facing, fighting an elite 6'7" athlete who throws a lead left hook from range, who throws a long straight right hand? How is Joshua going to deal with that? What is Joshua going to do if he has to adopt a back foot game? Does he have that in his locker? This is the kind of fight where, if Joshua is able to get on his front foot, if he's able to in any way negate the Klitschko jab, if he can catch that Klitschko jab and stand in 3/4 range, or if he can duck under that Klitschko jab and get into the engine room, then I think Joshua wins the fight, probably by knockout. But on the balance of probability, I think the more likely option is that Joshua struggles with that Klitschko jab. I think it makes him tentative. I don't think he'll have had experience of dealing with something like that. I know he's been sparring big guys. I know he's been sparring the likes of Marius Wack, Joe Joyce, those sort of guys. But I think Klitschko's a different level. And I think Joshua's going to get hurt in this fight. And I don't know how he's going to live up to that. I've always thought, even from watching him in the amateurs before he turned pro, I always thought that he's maybe not the most natural and instinctive fighter under fire. I've always thought he kind of stiffened up a bit and became a bit robotic when the bullets were flying. And I don't think it's right that the first time you get hit clean, properly, on occasions in the pro boxing ring, is against a guy like Wladimir Klitschko. I know he's been hit by Dillian Whyte, but that was one punch. I think he's going to be eating a jab in this fight. And I think he'll either become tentative and Klitschko will be able to win the fight from range on points, or more likely, I think Klitschko will be able to find a home for that left jab and be able to get his right hand cross off. And I think if that happens, it's likely that the fight will end in knockout. So, there you go, people. I've caveated it enough. I've said that I think any result is possible, and I do view this as a genuinely, hugely competitive fight where anything could happen. But my prediction is Wladimir Klitschko to win. And if I'm pushed to go for a method of victory, my prediction is Wladimir Klitschko to win the fight by knockout. I believe that Joshua is going to have to answer so many questions in this fight that are complete unknowns and unproven. He may answer them with flying colours, but I think that Wladimir Klitschko jab, that Wladimir Klitschko size, footwork and athleticism is going to keep Joshua at range. I think it's going to make him tentative. I think it's going to take him away from his A game. And when Wladimir Klitschko starts to soften people up with that jab, it's only a matter of time before he engages the right hand. And I think that could be lights out. I'm prepared to ignore the Fury-Klitschko fight. I don't believe that was Wladimir getting old overnight. I believe that was the particular test that Tyson Fury presented. But I'm very, very much looking forward to this fight. And I'm not surprised whatsoever if Joshua gets the win. He is the favourite. He has got all the momentum. He's got the youth. He's got, 100% KO ratio. This is a fight that could go either way. I'm going to do lots of extra coverage on the channel this week of this fight. There'll be a betting video on the fight. There'll be a weigh-in video. I'm sure we'll do some key questions or keys to victory or something like that. So if you want to catch all the build-up, take the time to hit subscribe now so you can check that out. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up button. And as, of course, comments always welcome. Leave your predictions in the section below. How do you think this fight will end? Many thanks as always for tuning in.